first podcast with me and Dave Kornacki. I'm Ricky Varandas. This is called the Ripple Effect Podcast. This is going to be just the opening pre-show podcast show. I don't know what to call it, but we're just going to tell a little bit about ourselves, what to kind of expect or what we hope to accomplish or not accomplish with this whole...
I think the first show should be just that whole song in its entirety.
We should probably get the most hits like that. But so basically, my whole idea, this whole podcast was came from mine and Dave's conversations. We'd have these good conversations about anything and everything, all these like really interesting things we're into and intrigued, and it seemed like me and Dave were like the only two people on the planet that were intrigued by the same weird things. If they had to do with like alternate history or UFOs or whatever stuff that most people you talk to about would think you're crazy, we seem to be really intrigued with and fascinated with. So we'd have these really good conversations, and then one thing led to another, and I'm like, you know what, that shit should have been taped. You know, it's you'd have these really good conversations that sometimes you make points that you don't remember making, and you're like, fuck, what did I say? You know, so it just it was this whole idea of kind of trying to capture that. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there who probably, you know, wish they had somebody to talk to about certain things that we talk about. You know, if it's psychedelics, if it's, you know, like I said, like some authors we like and some of the stuff we're intrigued with. And I remember just telling people about this podcast and just being like, oh, what is it about? And what are you guys going to talk about? And I remember just getting into some of the subjects, and they're like, dude, I wish I had somebody to talk to about that stuff. Like nobody I'm friends with talks about that stuff, you know? And so it was just this whole idea of, I'm like, you know what, that's kind of the purpose. The idea is to kind of expose, you know, or you know, highlight some interesting stuff that maybe not everybody knows about. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of people are just too busy to do any reading these days or watch any documentaries or whatever. And luckily, I'm a documentary addict, so you know, I might not be that interesting, but I can, you know, I feel like I've watched enough interesting stuff or read enough interesting stuff where I think it'd be fun to kind of share that with people. You know, I tell people about, oh, have you watched this documentary? And people are always like, no, I haven't yet, you know, and so it's cool to kind of share all that interesting stuff because, you know, I don't mind spending a lot of my free time, you know, staying up late watching documentaries. So, but that's you know, that's kind of what caused this. The title came from the idea, like I'm a big believer of the ripple effect in general, but you know, in terms of being able to share positive energy or positive ideas or open-mindedness. I'm a big believer that if you know, show self-control or open-mindedness or tolerance to other people's ideas and opinions, and you can kind of cause a ripple effect or positive energy. You know, I always make the example that it's almost like if Dave's in a good mood and I'm kind of in a crappy mood, but he cheers me up. Now he puts me in a good mood, and then my girlfriend calls me and I'm in a good mood, and I'm like, wow, Ricky was in a good mood, and he just put me in a good mood, and then it just kind of becomes this ripple effect. And same thing with negative energy; it can be the exact same effect. And so it just it's the idea that I think that, you know, this is our way of, you know, maybe doing starting a little bit of a ripple and kind of just sharing some alternative views on stuff, and just you know, just talking about everything and anything. We're going to have people that, you know, we're going to try to have some interesting people, you know, we'll see how far that goes and what we can do. But either way, I think me and Dave could probably, we got enough conversations in us where we could probably have a lot of hours of just me and him talking. So, you know, hopefully, you know, things keep interesting and we don't do anything boring, but I can't guarantee any subjects, because it's like we've had plenty of times where we've talked and it's led into relationships, talked about, you know, human tendencies and our personal philosophies, and then they've led into something crazy like Bigfoot, you know. So it just but that's what I think is going to make it interesting. You know, we were talking about before the show, like what's the topic of the, you know, or what were we talking about? The category, yeah. The category about you know, what's the category we maybe list our podcast in. And really I don't know, because it's just like I almost feel like a dick calling it philosophy, because it's like I'm not this intellect, you know. It's not like, oh yeah, we're philosophers and tune in and listen to some really deep fucking Socrates, you know. It's like we're gonna quote, but it's like it's not comedy, but it's like this like in between of like the beautiful thing about today, and you tell me if you agree with me or not, But I feel like the beautiful thing about technology is that there's going to be self-made intellects today. Like I did awful in school. I did really bad in school. Never paid attention. A lot of it was because it was boring as fuck. Like it was just like names and dates, learn names and dates, and it wasn't. It's like how does that relate to me? Why is that important to me? Like I don't. Like why do I care what happened in 1948 or whatever? But it's like if somebody told me, hey, if Hitler won World War II, we'd all be speaking fucking German right now. Then all of a sudden I'd be like, what? What the fuck are you? What? Tell me about this. I'd be intrigued with it. It's like it gets important and it gets intriguing when it relates to you. When you find, because it's like it's funny because Daniele Bugnelli, which I've told you about, and I'm a big fan of his work. And he this is an Italian. He's a professor. He's written books like. Make your own religion and all this stuff, and he says this all the time. He's a professor at this college, and he's like all his other teachers, they wish they could just study and research all day, and he's like, oh, this job would be great if you just forgot about the kids. And he's like, what? He's like, that's the most important part. Like the most important part isn't just knowing all this information, it's how does it relate to you. Like what's that information mean to your life or your philosophy, and how it molds who you are. And I think that's the important part. Like that's what you get these people, and we know people like this, that will just spiel out information, but none of it's important. Like,
yeah, or it's not. It doesn't relate to you personally. It's just facts.
Exactly, and I think that's the thing. It's just facts. It doesn't do anything for it. Like it does. I forget who made this example, but it reigns true for so many things. Like the difference between a really good guitarist who plays cover stuff, amazing musician. So it's like it's like the equivalent of knowing all this really interesting information, and then the guy who might not know all the information but can write some amazing music.
Yeah, it's like creating versus mimicking.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of people out there that take in information and they're great at regurgitating it and making themselves out to be this genius only because they take other people's information and spread it around. But there's also people that are out there that they're usually the quieter ones that create thought. They take in information, they assimilate it, and then when they spit it back out, they introduce their own perception and their own perspective of things, and kind of change things around. And that to me is you talked about being bored in school. When you're in school and in high school, when you're learning facts and just getting facts thrown at you and spitting them back, that's what's boring about education. But when you get into college, I had a college professor who was the opposite of what Bugnelli talked about, was all about getting people involved and making you think. And I had this one specific philosophy professor that wouldn't say things that he even believed, but they would just incite people to react. And you can go whatever your religion is. You grow up following religion because it's the thing to do. But when people question that and question it harshly, it really makes you defend things and really makes you think about what it is you actually believe. So I like you said, I think there's the fact side of things, and there's the things that make your mind really engage in thought.
Well, I think I think that's what people are intrigued with philosophy. I think the idea that it's not so much because it's like we define ourselves so many times. It's like I'm a Christian, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm a Democrat, I'm whatever, and it's like we define ourselves, and it's almost like I always use the example of picking a sports team. Like you're a Pats fan, I'm a Giants fan, and because of it, like I can't ever give Brady.
Fan?
No, I'm not. But if the idea that I can never say that Brady is a good quarterback because I already picked a team. I can't agree with you. You're on the other team.
But if Brady's traded to the Giants, then all of a sudden he's the greatest.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was actually Jerry Seinfeld had said one time, we as sports fans, we root for laundry because that's what it comes down to, the uniform that somebody wears.
That is
like
funny.
A-Rod, he's a villain in Boston, but we tried so hard to get him on our team, and if he had been on our team during all of this, we'd still love him. I mean, not at this point, but at the time when the Red Sox were trying to get A-Rod,
yeah.
Like Barry Bonds is still a hero. Out in California,
San Francisco,
but everywhere else, he's a villain.
And it's true, and I think it's this thing where we separate ourselves so much by using these titles. It's like I talk to a couple our good friends are very religious, and I always tell them like I'm very open minded with everything, religion being one of them. Like I feel like we should never be sold on any idea. Like the idea that you say, this is my opinion, it's not going to change. like it's almost like saying that no facts, no information could come out that could possibly, change your perspective. I can't say that that's true. Like I think that we should always say that this is my opinion at this point in my life, knowing what I know today, doing the research I've done, reading what I've read. It's like who knows? One day something could happen. I'm an atheist, but it's like something could happen where I could end up deciding that that makes sense, or some who knows? Jesus comes back.
You could get hit by a car and die.
Exactly. So it's just like to say that I know anything is stupid. Like I feel like people shouldn't say they know. Like that's why I sometimes I pick fights with not pick fights, but I end up finding myself in a debate with a religious person because the way they look at you, like you don't know what you're talking about and they know, and I just like, well, I'm like, with all due respect, nobody knows. Like, and it's just like you might think but we don't really know. And so it's one of those things where I feel like once we define ourselves as who we pick a title for ourselves, we're stuck to that title. We have to be that person, because if not, then it's almost like saying I don't know who the fuck I am. Like I say I'm a Christian or I say I'm a liberal, but that conservative kind of makes sense. But I can't say that because I'm a liberal, and it's just like, and I picked a team. It's like Jesse Ventura's book. Was it the Krypton Bloods and the whatever it was, that it was like the Bloods and the Crips, but he used the Democrats and Republicans and mushed the titles together. And it's kind of true. It's like two gangs. It's like two gangs, and you have to pick a team. And if you can't agree with the other team, it's like if you're wearing red, you can't agree with the blue team. And I think like it's like George Carl. This whole idea of like we're one. If you believe in evolution, or if you believe that we came from like stardust, at one time, and then throughout these years molded, just we end up being what we are today. It could, that could easily be true. And if it is, then there is something about us, a oneness. Like I remember growing up, and I'd always hear like these people, oh, I'm spiritual, or this oneness, we're all one. And I'm like, dude, shut up, you stupid hippie. Like, what are you talking about? Stop getting high. It's like once you get off that LSD, you realize we're not all one. And it just, but you come to find out, like when you really think about it, it's like there's all these things that separate us, and it's like really. Darwin, in his first like book about like human nature and tendencies, like he said the strongest, everybody, like especially in like a capitalism world that we live in today, like we're convinced that like the most primitive, the most human the strongest human behavior or natural behavior or whatever you want to call it is trying to be the alpha, being competitive, surviving. But really, Darwin wrote about how sympathy is like the strongest human behavior, human nature, or and it makes sense because you look at it. We use all these titles to separate us, but the second somebody's hurt, like if you see somebody get hit by a car or needs help, you don't think about I'm not gonna go help him. I think he's a Republican, or like or like oh. That guy's a Mormon. I hate Mormons. I'm not going to help him. He just got, it's like you just go help them. Your first instinct is to help.
Yeah, and sympathy is an instinct.
Yeah, it is. And so it's like this idea that like, no, they're telling us that it's natural for us all to be against each other and be separate, but really it's more natural for all of us to help each other. And like, that's why certain artists like this band I like, Enter Shikara, and a couple of artists I listen to, they talk about how like, fuck boundaries, fuck borders, fuck flags. And I'm always like, what the fuck do they mean by that? And it's just like, the more I think about it, I'm like, I get what they mean. Like, it's people are people. It doesn't matter which part of the world you're born in or what your religion is or what color you are. People are people. And once we stop separating people, then it's just like recently here's a perfect example. The Indian girl who just won Miss America. Have you heard about this?
No, not at all.
So first time in history that an Indian girl won Miss America. Gorgeous girl, right? Beautiful girl. And all this they get all these hate tweets. And it was funny because the Young Turks, there's a internet radio show like that I listen to. They're awesome. And so I was listening to them, and they're going over some of the tweets that they got for hate tweets. And people are like, God damn. How could they disrespect America like this? A Muslim winning after September 11th, so disrespectful. She ain't American, this and that. And I'm like, dude, you're not American either, unless you're Native American. Like, and just going off like all these dumb tweets about September 11th and how disrespectful it was. I'm like, she's Indian. She's not like what you think Al Qaeda is or what you think like the Middle East is. Like, it's how detached we are, and it's like how little we understand of other people's cultures, and especially in America. Like being born from in another country and like hearing other people's point of views on what they think America is. Like a lot of times they think we're, a lot of, and I consider myself as American as I do Portuguese, because even though I was born in Portugal, I was raised here, so just like I'm very Americanized when it comes to, and I love, and the thing is too, is like the one thing I love about America, I can't take anything away from the fact that I'm doing this in America. I did music in America. I was all my influences were American or English speaking American people, who are, or at least, lived in America. It's like all these great people that molded me and my philosophies were American, because, I didn't listen to people from other countries because I couldn't understand them as well. My understanding of the Portuguese vocabulary isn't as good as English. So it just made more sense for me to read quotes or authors that wrote in English. So just like we look at what the government does to basically reflect the country, but it really doesn't. Like there's a lot of amazing people in this country that hate what the government does and doesn't back the dumb wars we get into, or the poor political decisions we make. And so, but from the outside looking in, if you're from Portugal and you're like, all you see is this dumbass president Bush who can reads at a third grade reading level and went to an unjustified war. And then that he represents us. He's our PR guy. Yeah, I mean, he's the guy who represents us. So people are like, what are you Americans thinking voting this guy in? And I'm just like, well, that wasn't necessarily, us. Technically, the first time he didn't get the popular vote. So, but it's just the idea that, like I lost track what the fuck I was even talking about.
Yeah, that tends to happen.
But, but basically, it's the idea that they represent us. So, like, I know I'm going to probably get a lot of criticism about you sound like a foreigner who hates America, because I have a big issue with like American policies and what's going on. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people would have the same issues. They just don't have the time to do the research for it. And we're just built these lives where we're so busy we don't have time to read and kind of stay up to date. We put on the TV, like that movie I told you about from the early 70s, Network. They saw the future perfectly. If anybody hasn't seen this movie, please watch Network on Netflix, on YouTube, whatever. Once you see like some of the popular clips from the movie, you'll probably recognize some of those clips. Like, I'm mad as hell, and and like you're gonna, the tube's gonna teach you how to dress, and the tube's gonna teach you how to, tell you what to believe, and it's so true. Today, that is so true. We get all our news from mainstream media, from whatever, and they can sell us whatever they want.
It's even, what, our opinion is even molded by our own opinion as it's presented to us. I was at the gym the other day, and I'm on a treadmill watching the news, and they were talking about gas prices. And for the longest time, gas prices have gone up and down, and well, more up than down.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's been crazy, the rate at which gas prices have been going up. And when those things started happening, they would always do these polls. They would polling Americans, what do they feel about the gas prices? And everybody used to be, so up in arms about that. And now it's like there's so much apathy as it relates to things like that. It's almost like we've become accustomed to it. And the most recent poll, and I can't quote it, but what I took from what they were presenting on the news was like, there's nothing we can do about it. That's the kind of the American attitude about things. Initially, we're upset by it, but after enough media exposure, and after we see so many stories about the same thing over and over, it's just pounded into us. We become almost numb to it. And the point being, this most recent poll about our feelings on gas prices was like, well, what can we do about it? Like we don't even care anymore. We don't even question or think about how, what causes the gas prices to go up. And there's all kinds of different information out there. Some of it put out by the gas companies, the refineries, and they're talking about, well, the latest thing I've seen is how when you break down the cost of a gallon of gasoline, they're quick to point out how much of that goes to state and local taxes and how much of that is actually profit to the oil companies. But through this gigantic climb in gas prices, we've also watched these fuel companies. Their profits are record profits.
They're making quarterly gains,
but they're showing this on the news. They're showing the billions and billions of dollars these oil companies are making, and the latest poll is, well, there's nothing we can do about it. You know what I mean? It's just forced down our throats.
I think we accepted the fact that gas prices are continuously going to go up, and I think we got really mad at one point, but I think that's kind of the point. The point is put gas prices really high that we get mad, and then when they bring it down a little bit, we're like, oh, at least it's not $8.
Yeah.
You know, it's like bring it up to 10.